The man who lived as a fake person for years. This is Ex-Human File, where every story is a case, and every case reveals something human. For years, he moved through American high society like he belonged there. He spoke carefully. He dressed the part. He seemed educated, wealthy, connected, and most importantly, he carried the kind of last name that made people stop asking questions. He called himself Clark Rockefeller. To the people around him, he was mysterious, eccentric, even impressive. He claimed ties to one of the richest families in American history. He spoke about money, art, finance, and status like it was all normal to him. He married a successful woman, entered exclusive social circles, and built the kind of life most con artists only dream about. But behind that identity was something much stranger. Because Clark Rockefeller was not a Rockefeller. In fact, he wasn't even Clark Rockefeller. His real name was Christian Gerhartsreiter, a German-born imposter who had spent years drifting through the United States under different names, different backstories, and different lives. Authorities eventually said he had used multiple aliases, including Christopher Chichester, Christopher Crow, and Charles Smith. By the time his fake life collapsed, investigators were no longer asking who he was pretending to be. They were asking how one man had managed to become so many people for so long. And the strangest part of the story is this: he didn't succeed because his lies were perfect. He succeeded because people wanted them to be true. Christian Gerhartsreiter arrived in the United States from West Germany as a young man. Over time, he appears to have discovered something powerful. In the right environments, confidence can matter more than proof. If you look right, sound right, and move like you belong, a surprising number of people will accept your story before they verify it. That pattern would define almost everything that came next. Before he became Clark Rockefeller, he had already been living under other identities. One of the names linked to him was Christopher Chichester, a persona he used in California in the 1980s. Later reporting described how he kept shifting roles and personal histories, changing not just his name, but his social identity depending on what the moment required. He could present himself as aristocratic, intellectual, artistic, wealthy, or connected. His life wasn't one lie. It was a chain of lies, each one building on the last. Then came the version of himself that worked best: Clark Rockefeller. It was a brilliant choice because the Rockefeller name carried its own authority. It suggested old money, education, breeding, and untouchable status. A person using that name didn't have to explain himself too much. The name did the work for him. According to reporting at the time, he was able to charm his way into elite spaces, including Boston's Algonquin Club, and present himself as exactly the kind of strange, private rich man people expect old money families to produce. And eventually, the performance became a life. He married Sandra Boss, a highly successful businesswoman with a Harvard MBA. For years, she believed she had married a Rockefeller. Later, when the relationship began to break down, she said she had a major blind spot. That line matters because it explains something uncomfortable about human nature. Once we build a reality around someone, we resist evidence that threatens it, especially when that reality is tied to love, ambition, or social identity. The fake identity lasted for years. That's what makes this story so disturbing. He wasn't pretending for a weekend. He wasn't running a quick scam. He built an entire personal mythology and lived inside it. He had the name, the manner, the posture, the tone, the selective privacy. He understood that rich, powerful people are often seen as eccentric rather than suspicious. When ordinary people act strange, others get nervous. When wealthy people act strange, others assume depth. That difference can hide a lot. This is an inference from the reporting and the pattern of how he moved through elite spaces, not a direct quote from investigators. But fake identities don't usually collapse all at once. They crack. In this case, the cracks appeared during the marriage. Boss eventually became suspicious and, according to reporting, started trying to verify who he really was. He could not provide convincing proof that he was who he claimed to be. That suspicion led to divorce proceedings. And once the marriage started collapsing, the identity lost its safest place to live. What had once been accepted privately now had to survive scrutiny. It didn't. By then, the story had shifted from social deception to something darker. After the divorce, an agreement gave Boss custody of their daughter, while he was allowed supervised visits. Then, on July 27th, 2008, during one of those supervised visits in Boston, he abducted his daughter. Authorities said he pushed aside the social worker, grabbed the child, and fled in an SUV. That single act exploded the entire performance. Suddenly, the strange rich man wasn't mysterious anymore. He was a national news story, a fugitive, and a man the public wanted identified. And now the lie had a deadline. A con can survive in private. It almost never survives a manhunt. He was captured on August 2nd, 2008 in Baltimore, where authorities found the child unharmed. By then, investigators were working backward through the identity. They weren't just asking where he went. They were asking who he was. Reuters reported that on August 15th, 2008, the FBI said Clark Rockefeller had been positively identified as Christian Karl Gerhartsreiter, a German con man. Investigators used fingerprints, including prints tied back to older immigration records, to confirm it. That reveal transformed the story. This was no longer just an abduction case involving a fraudulent father. It became the story of a man who had apparently moved through America as a self-invented character for years. Reports tied him to multiple aliases and to an old California disappearance and murder investigation. In 2013, he was convicted of murdering John Sohus in a decades-old California case. What had looked like one fake life turned out to have a far darker history behind it. So how does something like this happen? How does a man invent himself so completely that intelligent, successful, socially connected people accept him? Part of the answer is status. People tend to question downward and trust upward. A prestigious name acts like social armor. It lowers suspicion. It fills in missing information. It makes other people do the work of defending the lie for you. If someone says they're related to one of America's most powerful families, many people will unconsciously edit their own judgment around that claim. They won't investigate the way they would investigate an ordinary stranger. Another part is performance. Most people don't expect to meet a professional imposter. They expect lies to look clumsy. They expect deception to stutter. But some lies are elegant. Some liars are calm. They understand tone, timing, and silence. They know that details can be dangerous, so they stay selective. They let your imagination finish the job. And then there's the hardest part to admit. Sometimes, people believe because belief is more rewarding than doubt. If a man seems rich, cultured, and connected, Believing him can feel exciting. Doubting him can feel awkward, cynical, even socially risky. That hesitation creates space. And in that space, fake people can build entire lives. That's what makes this case perfect for Human File. It isn't just a story about one imposter. It's a story about how identity works in the first place, about how much of a person exists in documents and how much exists in performance, about how often trust is based less on evidence than on atmosphere, about how easily human beings mistake confidence for truth. Christian Gerhartsreiter did not become believable because he created a flawless identity. He became believable because he understood what people wanted to see. A rich man can be distant. An intellectual can be odd. An aristocrat can be secretive. A Rockefeller can be eccentric. He hid inside expectations. And for years, that was enough, until one violent decision destroyed the illusion and forced the world to look directly at the man underneath the costume. Not Clark Rockefeller, not an heir, not a private genius, just a man who learned that if he acted like somebody important, people might never ask who he really was. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all. The fake person didn't just live for years. For a while, everyone else helped keep him alive. And that brings us to the end of this file. Thanks for listening to Human File. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next file.